But that was a bizarre time.
That's amazing. Yeah, that is amazing. Was there a time, I'll just ask you this, was there a time when you all of a sudden you just sat there and thought, Jesus, I'm actually doing this now? You know, was there an incident which took place or a bit of a time when you think, geez, I can't go back to my old life. This is it.
Well, you know, it's funny. John Fitzgerald, who's a good friend of mine, and former Davis Cup captain and great player, he said to me a couple of years ago, he goes, Moose, you know what? You're more a tennis person now than a football person because you've been involved. And I ended up marrying a tennis player, and it's basically right. I've been involved in it for so long, but there were so many moments like that. Like when I was working with Sampras, you know, one of my great jokes when I was talking to the other pros was, are you guys still travelling? Are you guys still paying for your flights? You know, like I was travelling private with Pete everywhere, you know, so we'd fly from LA to Germany.
Yeah. Beautiful.
So you guys still on commercial. That was my big joke. But I did have a moment where it was at the US Open and Pete was playing Andre Agassi in the final, and I was coming out to sit in his box and I'm sitting down, and Paul Anicone, who was Pete's tennis coach, he goes, oh, Moose, I'd like you to meet a good friend of mine, Christy Brinkley. And I go, oh, g'day, Christy, how you going? And like,
hello.
You know,
Hello.
Yeah. Hello, Christy, Moose, how are you? And then I'm going to sit down, and then there's like the Baldwin brothers, who you meet all these people. They're sitting just over from us, and they're like, "Hey, Moose, how you doing, Moose?" And then there was like John Lovitz, the comedian. Then there was another guy and another guy, and I'm sitting there and I'm thinking exactly what you said. I'm thinking, how in the world did this happen? How am I in this position? You know, and there were even moments. Pete was a big fan of Pearl Jam. And I ended up, we would go to Pearl Jam concerts and they'd sit us up on stage with an esky. We'd be at the side watching. I ended up becoming mates with the guys in Pearl Jam, and their manager is one of my best buddies. So whenever they're in town, they look after me. And I've even actually given the Pearl Jam guys a little pump-up talk just before they've gone on stage. Like,
magnificent.
Nice. Yeah. So it's been unbelievable, some of the things that have happened, but. You know, my whole goal was to try and get that one AFL game, and probably if I hadn't have persevered and just basically had a goal to try and be the best I could be, and then that taught me the lessons. Little did I realise that taught me the lessons along the way to be able to pass on that information to other people to try and give their best. So I always say to athletes I work with, I go, look, anything's possible, but it's not going to be handed to you on a platter, and you've got to work out and understand what it is to give your best.
Yeah, and mate, look, that's fantastic. I thought it'd be interesting, like you talk about the little rich kid throwing the racket down, having that team involvement and working with others, taking some of that over to the individual sport of tennis, because you know a lot of tennis people and a lot of golf people who are successful have a team around them. You know, it's not just them. And I, you know, good ones talk about the people in my team. Did you find that some of the stuff you worked with and through in football, in a team sport, was transferable to the tennis and the golf?
Yeah, I think it was. But one of the things I used to love to talk to, because I think the biggest advantage I had was that I was oblivious to the tennis world and the tennis attitudes of individual athletes. And I used to get them sometimes crying after a match, going, oh, it was all right for you. You were in a team. And I go, hang on a minute. I was in a team, but if the coach decided he didn't want to play me the next week, I was out of the team. Now, you're the CEO, you're the boss, you're the coach. You know, if anyone, you know, if you don't want to play tennis, you don't want to play. But if you're good enough to make points, you can survive out here. So it's up to you how good you go. If you don't want to give your best, don't give your best. But you've got to take ownership of what you're doing and who you are.
Yeah.
And you do have to tick all those little boxes, you know, with your diet, with your rest, with your practice, and then understanding what it is to be a great competitor. But I think probably the biggest transfer for me was the competitive mindset about not giving up, you know, second efforts, third efforts, you know, not becoming a victim when things weren't going your way. You know, you've got a choice. You can either let negative bring you down, or you can use it as a trigger to make you more determined.
Yeah, it's good. It's very good, mate, because I've always said this.